US Secretary of Defense Ash Carter has given an interview to the American news network NBC on a number of issues affecting the world right now. Among them, Russia's alleged hacking of the Democratic Party and the fight against terrorism. More on this now from Middle East expert Joshua Landis. Mr. Landis, welcome back to RT International. First off, let's consider Ash Carter's comments that Russia isn't pulling its weight in the fight against terrorism. Let's just quickly listen to what he said.
They haven't done anything against
and you mean anything?
ISIL.
Did you put it at zero?
Virtually zero. They came in, they said they were going to fight ISIL, and they said they were going to help end the civil war in Syria. They haven't done either of those things.
Is that how you see it, Joshua?
Well, of course, he's spinning. The context of this is a big debate going on in America. And both the Republicans, some Republicans, and the Democrats are trying to hurt Trump by using this intelligence investigation into whether Russia has influenced the elections or not. And so this is another way to, in a sense, hurt Trump by undermining the notion that the Russians are doing anything in Syria, because Trump, of course, has said that he would work with the Russians. But the Russians have, in fact, bombed ISIS hundreds of times in Palmyra, in El-Bab, in Deir ez-Zor, and in Raqqa. So the Russians have taken out long trails of tanker trucks and so forth. This is a little bit of spinning.
And that massive air campaign, Palmyra, as you mentioned, but to then label it as virtually zero, why do you think he went to such extreme descriptions?
Well, precisely because we're in a campaign of demonizing Russia right now. Really, it's not about Russia so much as it's about Trump. I think the Democrats and many Republicans like McCain, who've been very badly hurt by Trump, are sticking it to him. And they're sticking it to him because he's denied the intelligence communities and he's been friendly with Russia. And this is a way to embarrass him.
And even to the extent of ignoring that peace deal that was brokered between Russia, Turkey and Iran to try and start bringing Syria's best hope of peace in years and help in some way to at least separate those rogue elements among any militant factions in there, to ignore that completely as well. That seems a bit peculiar, doesn't it?
Well, you know, the U.S. newspapers today are publishing stories about the research of a very good political scientist who's demonstrated in his database that 81 elections around the world since World War II the U.S. has tried to interfere with 81 international elections, whereas Russia and the Soviet Union have tried to interfere, I think, 36 times. So the United States has actually interfered with foreign elections more than twice as much as Russia, which I must say one has to be proud as an American.
You mentioned about a lot of it's down to taking potshots at Donald Trump. During a State Department briefing, spokesman John Kirby said the failure in the Middle East was incredibly frustrating. Do you think that explains more about the hostile attitude towards Moscow over the Middle East?
Well, you know, America has been very confused about its Syria policy. We just heard these long tapes of John Kerry, Secretary of State, explaining to Syrian activists that that when Russia intervened in Syria in 2015, the United States had been hoping that the growth of ISIS and its increasing spread towards Damascus would cause Assad to cry uncle and make a political deal. Instead, the Russians intervened and saved Damascus from falling to ISIS.
Let's move on to the other key beef that he's got with Russia right now that came up in this NBC interview, Russia's alleged meddling in the US election up to November. Let's just take a quick listen to what Ash Carter had to say.
The steps that have been taken so far probably represent a beginning and not the end, a floor, not the ceiling. Obviously, it'd be up to the next administration and the next Congress to take those steps.
Given the reports we've had, Joshua, we've had these sanctions, we've had reports that are suggestive, talks about things like confidence in claims, but no concrete evidence. And yet there he is, Ash Carter, talking about potential for yet more sanctions. How far is this going to go?
You know, I think that once the inauguration takes place, this conflict particular conflict will die down. There'll be many others, because America is extremely divided today. Democrats are furious at the way that they've lost these elections, and they're furious at Trump, who they dislike intensely. And I must say, Trump has been very vicious in attacking Hillary Clinton and attacking Democrats and in dividing the United States. So there's tons of controversy. I think this is just a beginning, and we'll see many more before this is through. But I don't suspect that President Trump will try to push this forward. On the other hand, we've seen a real demonization of Russia in the last month, in the last several weeks. And that is a bit worrying, because even the Democrats, who've usually been a little bit more gentle towards Russia, are now pushing the anti-Russia propaganda.
Things are definitely being frosty. I like your optimism that the inauguration might take the heat out of some of this. Let's see what happens come January the 20th. For now, though, Joshua Landis, thanks for joining us on RT International.
Pleasure.